Good morning, everyone. I'll give you something to look forward to. The first day of spring is March 20th, 21 days away. Now, this is the last chapter from our current quarterly, and next week we will start in the book of Philippians. Today, though, we're going to look at the Psalms 139, which was written by King David. And basically, the psalm is David telling us that he can't escape God's knowledge of him. He can't escape God's presence. And he's also saying he can't escape God's power and sovereignty throughout Psalms 139. Now, the psalm begins with and ends with David wanting God to search his heart to know him. Psalms 139:1 says, "O Lord, thou hast searched me and known me." This verse has been described as a statement of personal involvement by God in David's life, and David's life as it applies to God. So David also proclaims God's personal involvement in Psalm 17:3, which occurred a number of years earlier, where he said, "Thou hast proved mine heart, thou hast visited me in the night, thou hast tried me and shall find nothing." And so this is one of the things of some of David's Psalms, is that he wants God to search him and to find, he doesn't want him to find anything, but he wants him to search him to help keep him going straight, to keep him on a straight line. God even told Jeremiah in Jeremiah 16, 17, 18, he says, "I see everything they do, they cannot hide from me. The things they do, their sin is not hidden from my eyes." So God's telling the people through Jeremiah that do what you want to do, but I see everything. Now, Hebrews 4:13 goes even a little bit different. It says, "And there is no creature hidden from his sight, but all things are naked and open to the eyes of him to whom we must give account." So there he adds into the point that God, the Creator, holds us accountable and he sees everything. So that phrase says, "Thou hast searched me." What does that mean? Does it mean, yep, he searched me, he knows me? What it means is that God looks at all my thoughts, my actions, my emotions, my feelings, my habits. He searched every inch of me and he knows me. God has full knowledge of my spiritual condition. And so David then continues in verses 2 through 6. He starts to give examples to state God's omnipresence, how God is surrounding us and knows what's going on. Verse 2 says, "Thou knowest my downsitting and my uprising. Thou understandest my thoughts afar off." Literally, it says God knows every minute of everyone's personal life. Standing or sitting, lying down, he knows it. Even Isaiah told King Hezekiah God's message in 2 Kings 19:27, "But I know your dwelling place. You're going out and you're coming in. Your rage against me." So God knows everything about your comings and goings, even your rage that goes against God. Jesus told the scribes in Matthew 9:4, "But Jesus, knowing their thoughts, said, Why do you think evil in your hearts?" So it's not just the physical things you do, it's the thoughts that you have. It's the thoughts and the feelings in your heart that God and Jesus even know. And then verse 3 says, "Thou compassest my path and my lying down, and art acquainted with all my ways." Meaning that God comprehends or understands my path or the way I live my life. He's acquainted with all my ways, my habits, and my traits. Verse 4 says, "For there is not a word in my tongue, but lo, O Lord, thou knowest it altogether." In verses 1 and 2, David tells us that God knows our deeds, thoughts. And now David tells us that God knows what we are about to say before we even say it. Verse 5 goes on to say, "Thou hast beset me behind and before, and laid thine hand upon me." Now, some versions of the Bible point to this verse and say it's about God's protection, all surrounding protection. The CEV and the Good News Testament, Good News tell us that that's two specific ones that say that. And it says, "And with your powerful arm you protect me from every side." But in the Albert Barnes commentary, this says it even a little bit better. It's different, but it says it better. The word used, beset, means to press upon or to compress, to surround. It has reference commonly used to when the armies would siege a city. So that the idea here is that God was on every side of a man. that he cannot escape in any direction, that he was like a garrison besieged in a city, so that there's no means of escape. Not that he's there necessarily to act as protection, but he's there surrounding us, and we cannot escape that presence. Now, the last part of verse 5 says, and lay thine hands upon me. That is, if I try to escape in any direction, I find your hand laid upon me. Escape is impossible, either to judgment or to guide me back. Now, this awareness of God's presence and knowledge overwhelmed David. In verse 6, he says, such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high. I cannot attain unto it. David cannot understand and comprehend all this information. He called the knowledge wonderful, but far above his comprehension. Paul told us in Romans 11:33, oh, the depth of the riches of wisdom and knowledge of God, how unsearchable his judgment and his paths beyond tracing out. This goes to God's plan. We don't always understand what it is. And Romans 11:34 says, who has known the mind of the Lord, or who has been his counselor? This is a concept that we find hard to believe, that how is one entity that all-knowing? Now, verses 7 through 12 speak about God's omnipresence even more, that God is everywhere. We cannot hide from him. Verse 7 says, whither shall I go from thy spirit, or whither shall I flee from thy presence? Meaning that we can't go anywhere. Jonah sought to flee from God's presence. He only found himself brought more absolutely and more perceptibly into God's presence. Jeremiah 23:24. Who can hide in secret places so that I cannot see them, declares the Lord. Do not I fill heaven and earth, declares the Lord. It's telling us that there is no place. Even at 2 o'clock in the morning behind closed doors with the lights out, you cannot hide from God. David continued in verse 8. He says, if I ascend up into heaven, thou art there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, thou art there. Literally, he says, if I could ascend into heaven, I would find you there. If I could descend into hell to escape, I would find you there. Proverbs 15:11 says, if the Lord can see everything in the world of the dead, he can see into our hearts. So again, your actions are not hidden from him. Your thoughts in your brain are not hidden from him. Your feelings and how you feel and are spiritual in your heart are not hidden from God. God told Amos in Amos 9:2, though they dig into hell, from there my hand shall take them. Though they climb up to heaven, from there I will bring them down. Again, meaning that there's no place you can go that God can't reach you and put you where you need to be. Verses 9 through 10 says, if I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there shall thy hand lead me, and thy right hand shall hold me. David is saying that he cannot fly fast enough or far enough to escape God's presence, that God's guiding and strong hand would be there. And continued in verses 11 and 12, if I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, even the night shall be light about me. Yea, the darkness hideth not from thee, but the night shineth as the day. The darkness and the light are both alike to thee. Even darkness cannot hide someone from God. The night becomes light around us. To God, the night shines as bright as day. In Daniel 2:22, it says, he reveals deep and secret things. He knows what is in the dark, and light dwells with him. But even a better interpretation is that even the night shall be light about me. God's presence with David and with us is like the constant light in the darkness. As we saw in Exodus 13:21, that tells us that God was a guide both day and night for the Israelites while they were in the wilderness. And then in the New Testament, John 8:12, when Jesus spoke again to the people, he said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. God is omnipresent. We cannot escape or hide from his presence in our lives. David gave specific reasons for the knowledge of our lives. In verse 13 it says, for thou hast possessed my reins, thou hast covered me in my mother's womb. So what he's saying is that everything before now, in the first 12 verses, David is starting to give us a reason that God has all this knowledge. It's because He possessed us from the moment of conception. He planned us. He made us. The idea is not that God possesses or owns us, but that he had made us and that he knows all about us. The word reigns means literally our inward parts, meaning our mind, our soul, our physical body, our desires, our affections, our passions. Now, part of King David's confidence and encouragement was his knowledge that he was created by God at conception and through his birth, and that after creating him, God stayed with him, guided him, helped him, and he was ever present when David needed him. Verse 14 goes on to say, I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. David is praising God and thanking him for making him so wonderfully complex. David marvels at it and is amazed at what God has done in creating him. David says, your workmanship is marvelous, and how well I know it. If you ever study the physical human anatomy, even the most basic of classes, you realize how complex, how awesome, and how wonderful the human body is. And God made us. He knows each and every part of us. Now verses 15 and 16 says, my substance was not hid from thee, when I was made in secret and curiously wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Thine eyes did see my substance, yet being unperfect, and in thy book all my members were written, which in continents were fashioned, when as yet there is none of them. Verse 14, David praised and thanked God for his marvelous work in putting together and creating the human body. Here David acknowledges that God was there at conception. There's nothing hidden from him. At the moment of conception, God was there. And in the development of the baby within the womb, God was there, and that God saw him before he was born, and he scheduled every day of David's life before he took his first breath. Charles Spurgeon wrote this about verse 15. If we are marvelously wrought upon even before we are born, what shall we say of the Lord's dealings with us after we quit his secret workshop, meaning our birth? And he directs our pathway through the pilgrimage of life. What shall we not say of that new birth, which is even more mysterious than the first, and exhibits even more the love and the wisdom of the Lord? Verse 17 and 18, how precious also are thy thoughts unto me, O God. How great is the sum of them. If I should count them, they are more in number than the sand. When I awake and I am still with thee. Charles Spurgeon wrote this, you know that people are very proud if a king has merely looked at them. I have heard of a man who used to boast all his life that King George IV, such a beauty as he was, once spoke to this man. He only said, get out of the road. But it was a king who said it. So the man felt greatly gratified thereby. But you and I, beloved, can rejoice that God, before whom kings are as grasshoppers, actually thinks of us and thinks of us often. In verses 19 and 20, surely thou wilt slay the wicked, O God. Depart from me, therefore, ye bloody men, for they speak against thee wickedly, and thy enemies take thy name in vain. David makes an abrupt shift from the spirit of wonder and adoration to intense prayer against the wicked and against bloodthirsty men. It wasn't primarily because these men opposed David, but because they opposed God, as the last part of verse 20 indicates, for they speak against you wickedly. Albert Barnes points out that the idea here is not that David was in danger from the wicked and the bloody men and those that spoke against God at that time, but that he desired to be separate from that class of people. He did not wish to be ranked with them. He did not want to partake of their conduct or to share their faith. He had no sympathy with them, and he desired to be separate from them altogether. And in stronger language, David states that he hates these people. Verse 21, 22, do not I hate them, O Lord, that I hate thee? And am not I grieved with those that rise up against thee? I hate them with perfect hatred. I count them mine enemies. The thought of perfect hatred sounds odd in the Bible. It sounds odd coming from David. It sounds contrary to the Christian belief of forgiveness and love. It also sounds like an endorsement of a vice rather than an endorsement of a virtue. Proverbs 8:13 says, "The fear of the Lord is to hate evil, pride and arrogance and the evil way, and the forward mouth do I hate." Perfect hatred means that David had no approval whatever of their conduct, with no sympathy for the evil they do, and with no words of apology for their sinful acts. Somebody did wrong, David didn't apologize for them, with entire disapproval for their words and their actions. David continued by saying that he counted them as his enemies, as they are the enemies of God. He regarded them as his enemies. He did not wish to be associated with them or again to be regarded as one of them. It's not that he hated them personally. He hated their actions. He hated their whatever they endorsed that was contrary to what God preached. Now, David ends his psalm with a humble prayer in verses 23 and 24. He says again, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting." He's appealing to God that if you see something that's not supposed to be there, a wrong thought, then please draw it out of me. Albert Barnes wrote this: "The word rendered thoughts occurs only in one other place, and that's Psalms 94:19. The idea here is search me thoroughly, examine not merely my outward conduct, but what I think about. What are my purposes? What passes through my mind? What occupies my imagination, my memory? What secures my affections and controls my will?" He must be a very sincere man who prays that God will search his thoughts, for there are few who would be willing that their fellow man, even their best friends, should know all that they are thinking about. Excuse me. Alexander Maclaren wrote, "Very beautifully does the lowly prayer for searching and guidance follow the psalmist's burst of fire. It is easier to glow with indignation against evildoers than to keep oneself from doing evil. Many secret sins may be hidden under a cloak of zeal for the Lord." So that ends Psalms 139, a psalm that gives us an idea of God's knowing us better than we could possibly know ourselves. That no matter the circumstances, good or bad, that God is with us. In Jeremiah 23:23, "Am I a God who is near, declares the Lord, and not a God far off?" In 2 Corinthians 13:11, "Finally, brethren, farewell. Become complete, be of good comfort, be of one mind, live in peace, and the God of love and peace will be with you." So, I leave you with this graffiti that was found in ancient Pompeii. "Whoever loves, let him flourish. Let him perish who knows not love. Let him perish twice, whoever forbids love." Thank you, one and all.